Hello everybody, my name is Happy and I'd like to welcome you all to my History Reaction channel. Well, I've been kind of in the mood for some British humor, so I decided I would look for some humorous British videos that touch on history. So I decided I was going to do the Map Men and a video on the Netherlands, and I decided to go ahead and tackle Philomena Kunk on Britain, specifically the World War I through World War II period. If you're not familiar with Philomena Kunk, she is a character, to put it that way, who does history documentaries and culture documentaries where she goes out and interviews experts, but she's actually a comedian. Diane Morgan, I think it is. Is it? I think it is. And she just gives straight questions that are totally absurd or show a complete misunderstanding of the topic, things like that. And the experts that she is interviewing have to try to answer her questions without losing their composure. I've seen some of the other stuff she's done. I don't think I've seen this one. In fact, what I think I've seen is like the best of Philomena Kunk. I'm not sure I've seen any of the actual videos as in a whole section. We're not doing this whole thing, obviously. We're just going to do World War I through World War II. So let's have some fun with this. This is just for laughs, but we'll learn some real history along the way. So let's get into this. Oh, in this case, I'm not going to include the original video in the comments or in the description down below because the only videos I could find were reposts. So if I ever come across an original video, I will put it down there, but I'm not going to. There's so many reposts of a repost of a repost of a repost of this that I don't feel obligated to give my source because none of them gave their source. It had to come from somewhere. And I like to go to the original source. So here we go.
In 1914, Britain suffered the first of many 20th century shocks.
Got it.
Nowadays, first world is something you put in front of the word problem to show that it isn't really that bad. Like running out of couscous or not being able to check Twitter in a tunnel. But back then, first world was what they called the war.
Okay, so she went from first world problems to First World War. Got it. I guess that kind of makes sense if you look at it from the right angle.
The First World War had loads of nicknames. The War to End All Wars,
the Great War, yeah.
And of course, World War I.
Why did they call World War I World War I?
It's quite pessimistic numbering, isn't it? Or did they just know it was the start of a franchise?
Okay, first of all, I think most historians would debate whether it was even the First World War. A lot of them will point to, for example, the 7 Years' War as potentially one of the First World Wars. But yeah, it would not have been called World War I at the time because it's definitely, they didn't see it at the start of the franchise. Quite the opposite, the war to end all wars, which, spoiler alert, it wasn't. Let's continue.
At the time, they weren't numbering the wars, although I think that in the First World War, the idea of it being a great war, denoting the sheer scale of the conflict, the casualty rate, was already becoming used quite a lot.
So it was called the Great War, but not because it was great. The First World War...
Not great in the sense of, man, that's great. But in the sense of large scale, yes, it was.
It was started by the killing of one man, Franz Ferdinand. You've probably never heard of him, or the band named after him. But he was dead important, by which I mean he was only important when he was dead.
Not true. He was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and it was just a matter of time before he ascended to it. So he would have been important either way, probably more on a regional scale, but he still would have been important.
His assassination triggered a series of other killings. Soon it caught on, and everyone wanted to be killed. It was a bigger craze than fidget spinners.
Debatable. I don't think anything was a bigger craze than fidget spinners. Although that never lasted long, did it? I mean, it was all over the place for like, what, a year of that? And then it just kind of faded into the background. I mean, they're still around, but there was a point where I couldn't go anywhere without seeing them everywhere.
Eventually, Britain got sucked into the fighting, and men queued up to have their flat caps converted into fighting men's helmets. Soon, hundreds of thousands of Tommies were heading for battle.
Why were all the British soldiers in World War I called Tommy? Was that just a coincidence?
Yeah, they were all named Tommy, pure coincidence. Nicknames in world wars, or in wars in general, is not uncommon, either for an entire nation's group of soldiers, or even just for specific units or branches of the service. In World War I, for example, the United States Army soldiers were typically called doughboy, was a common one. Things like that, pretty common.
No, it wasn't a coincidence. It's just a general name that became applied to British soldiers in the same way we talk of Fritz as being a generic name for German soldiers.
Yeah, and then later, like World War II, you'll get the Kraut, for example, or the Yanks in other periods for the Americans. Nicknames are just extremely common in the military.
What happened in Norman's Land? Were only people who were called Norman allowed in there?
Norman, no man's land is what she's going for.
Well, it's not Norman's land. This is no man's land, and the idea being that this is
the idea being that women aren't allowed there.
Is particularly dangerous
Excuse me, only women are allowed there.
Territory between the lines of the Germans on one side and the British on the other. This is essentially just a killing zone, a very dangerous zone in between trench systems.
Why did they fire shells at each other? Because shells wouldn't really hurt, would they? Unless they were those razor clam shells.
Yeah, asked the British soldiers in Boston during the Boston Massacre about whether shells were hurt or not, because angry protesting colonists were throwing shells at them. And that escalated to the point where a bunch of people got shot. So I would argue that those kinds of shells can be effective as well.
They're quite sharp, aren't they?
Well, these weren't seashells. These were heavy pieces of ordnance. We're actually talking about bits of metal in brass casing. So that's where the name shells comes from.
It's kind of impressive how these guys can keep a straight face while answering some of these questions. I know there is no way I could do that. I would just be shooting back with just as much insanity as she's doing.
All right.
Looking at footage from the time, it's hard to get a grip on just how brutal it must have been for Tommy and Norman, because it's in black and white and everyone's moving too fast, probably to avoid the shells. Even though it looks a bit like Charlie Chaplin, it's actually not funny at all. So you can't laugh, just like with Charlie Chaplin.
Ow!
One man who vividly captured the sheer horror of War I was the poet Wilfred Owen.
If, in some smothering dreams, you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face like a devil sick of sin. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues.
This kind of thing is common in war, in letters, in journals, in memoirs, but especially letters and journals where they're writing it on the spot. But World War I is kind of famous for all the poetry and prose that came out of the trenches. So it's not surprising they're bringing this up.
You get the gist.
My friend.
As if the killing wasn't bad enough, the accommodation was scarcely worth 2 stars on TripAdvisor. Soldiers had to live in trenches, snaking cramped corridors of filth and squalor, without so much as a patio.
The World War I trenches weren't the right place for conventional warfare, were they? But why did neither side think about mud wrestling? Because they're the perfect conditions, aren't they?
Well, yeah.
Well, I mean, trench warfare wasn't new. I think that whilst you will get the occasional game of Christmas football, I don't think that anyone actually ever thought that letting the guns fall silent and having mud wrestling competitions was
True. They did have the Christmas truce, for example, which was by no means approved, I should add. Yeah, mud wrestling. So there is precedent for that, not in World War I, but in the distant past. Sometimes in some of the really old stories, anyway, you'll hear stories of armies choosing champions who will fight it out in kind of the no man's land in between the two armies, and with the agreement that whoever's champion won, that side won the battle. You see it a lot, for example, in the Iliad, with epic battles between like Hector and Achilles. Whether anything like that actually happened or not, I want to say there are examples of something along those lines, but I could be mistaken, easily mistaken on that one. Just something that's tickling the back of my head, but definitely stories of that. So why not? Why couldn't we have just had, you know, a German soldier and a British soldier head out in no man's land and mud wrestle to determine who gets to move their trench up another 10 yards? Might have made the war a little shorter. I mean, seriously.
Was ever going to sort anything out?
Oh, he also said trench warfare wasn't new. That is absolutely true. It's been around forever. What made World War I different is, first of all, the extent of it, how widespread it was, how long these trenches were, and the fact that they got stuck in them, that advancing out of the trenches became almost impossible because of modern weaponry, the artillery and machine guns, things like that. They just got stuck in their trenches, and trenches would move almost daily, but just very little because of the circumstances.
I think they missed a trick, don't you? Eventually the war ended at 11 o'clock on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in the year 1119, 1118. Hence
no.
the term stopping for 11s. The soldiers came home to a Britain they could hardly recognise because it was wearing a skirt. While the Tommies had been away at the front, women had stepped into their old jobs. There were women milkmen, women postmen, women bus driver men, even women male prostitutes. What's more, the economy was in a pickle. After the war, many industries found it almost impossible to sell their goods abroad because abroad was mainly rubble. There were strikes and marches and a Great Depression. Things were shithouse bad.
Yeah, that's something we got to remember is in the wake of both world wars, most of Europe was in complete tatters, and quite a bit of Asia as well. So that part of the world, and for that matter, even Africa to a large degree, at least the heavily settled areas in the north, were in rubble. And the infrastructure was destroyed, farmland was destroyed, factories were destroyed. So there is a period after both world wars where Europe and Asia, but especially Europe, is going to be struggling to rebuild, recover, reestablish their economy. It's going to be a rough period. Places that escaped the war completely, at least in terms of devastation to their home, like the United States, are going to make out like bandits because of that. While some of the world powers like in Europe and Asia are struggling to recover, you're doing fine.
People needed escapism, but luckily for them, the age of mass entertainment was just beginning. It was the Roaring Twenties.
Yep.
City streets were full of jazz clubs, packed with Jeeveses and Worcesters, and women with Lego haircuts dancing like they were surprised while shitting their pants at a fancy dress party. And people who couldn't afford to enjoy a Roaring Twenties for themselves could still watch films of other people doing it at the newly invented cinema. The cinema was a cross between YouTube and theatre. Despite this, it was popular, and people queued to get in. They showed Charlie Chaplin films, but even that couldn't keep them away.
She has an issue with Charlie Chaplin, doesn't she?
The whole country went films bonkers. Going to the cinema in those days was more like going to a book, because there was no sound. The story was explained by words on the screen. A bit like spoilers, but happening at the same time as you were watching it, so not as annoying.
And if you couldn't make it to a cinema or cocktail bar, you could still enjoy the jazz age, because scientists had worked out a way to force jazz into your house using a magic called radio.
All right.
Radio.
that is a good point you just made. So think about this era and the people who are living through this. So let's say the last 2 decades of the 19th century, so from like 1880, let's say up until the end of World War II. Think of all the changes these people are going to see. They're going to see the invention of the radio, the invention of film, and the movie theaters. They're going to see the dramatic increase in the use of automobiles. They're going to see the first airplanes. Just so much is changing at this time. Even today, things are changing, but I think in terms of the radical nature of change, this is a period that probably had the hardest time. I mean, 1880s, you're going to see Alexander Graham Bell with the first telephones. Things are just going to the progress is going to just explode. And a lot of it's going to seem like magic. It really is. Because so much is changing. It just really is mind-boggling if you think about it. One moment. Sorry, my neighbors all have wood fireplaces. I do too, but I don't use it because I'm highly allergic to smoke, and they're killing me. They're trying to kill me off. They want my land, but I may have to pause periodically to deal with this. My eyes are watering and my throat's getting really messy, and I keep wanting to sneeze, so my apologies. All right, continuing on.
Was an exciting new invention that made it possible to hear other people's voices in your living room without the use of thin walls or a devastating mental condition.
To help keep the early airwaves in check, the government created something called the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC.
How come the BBC started with radio? Because radio's loads less popular than television, isn't it?
There are people in radio who'd get very angry about that.
Oh yeah, my brother is a radio broadcaster. Radio is definitely still around, it's still popular. As to why the BBC started radio, it's pretty obvious. TV wasn't invented yet.
Radio still performs tremendously well.
There's still radio.
There is still radio. At the time the BBC was set up, there wasn't a choice because there was no TV.
Luckily, a man called John Logie Baird was about to give birth to television. Not literally out of his vagina, but metaphorically out of his shed. After doing some weird experiments like something out of Wallace and Gromit, Baird's TV was finalised, although idiotically, he'd gone to the trouble of inventing it without checking whether there were any programmes on yet.
I knew that's where she was going with that.
It took a while before there was anything worth putting your iPhone down for. The earliest transmissions looked like Abraham Lincoln looming through a glass door and weren't very exciting. Luckily, it was a short step from there to the BBC's first Saturday night extravaganza, TV's opening night ceremony.
Vision and sound are on. The station goes on the air.
Could you imagine having like the first TV set in your neighborhood and watching the very first television broadcast? How magical that would be. It would just be such an incredible experience. And you got to remember that back in these days, TVs would be, even the TVs would be extremely rare because, like she said, there's nothing to watch on them. And they're a new invention, they're going to be super expensive. So you're not going to have a lot of them. But if you have that opportunity, I remember the moon landing when I was very, very little. It's one of my very earliest memories. And I can remember it was a party at my grandparents' house. They had everybody, had to have had neighbors over. They had to have co-workers over. And just about everybody in the extended family was there. It was packed because even in that late date, not everybody had a good television set. So it's not surprising that everybody came over to watch such an important event. But imagine this, where it's literally the very first television broadcast. And how many people must have been desperate to find someplace where they could watch it, to see this new magical device.
The show got a record audience of 400, the sort of viewing figures BBC4 still dreams of.
Ow.
Despite its popularity, the BBC was causing controversy from the start, and the powers that be were suspicious of it. Why did the government start the BBC in the first place? It seems like these days they're always trying
They
to
didn't.
close
It was
down.
private in the
Was it
beginning.
one of those stupid mistakes they made, like Brexit?
The government didn't strictly start the BBC. The BBC was originally a private company in 1922. It employed a rather fierce Scottish guy called John Reith. And people still talk about Reithian values and Reithian broadcasting. Reithian values were to inform, educate, and entertain.
What, all at the same time?
Yeah.
Yes.
Since those early days of black and white tat, the BBC has grown throughout the years to become one of the biggest programme shitting machines in the world, making groundbreaking, iconic programmes which still try to inform, educate,
Doctor
and
Who,
entertain.
yay!
So the BBC is supposed to inform, educate, or entertain.
And entertain.
I'm going to list some BBC things, and I want you to say whether they inform, educate, or entertain. Okay. News at 10.
Inform.
Open University.
Educate.
Doctor Who.
Entertain.
All the above.
Strictly Come Dancing.
Entertain.
Holmes Under the Hammer.
Entertain.
Inspector Phillips.
What is Inspector Phillips?
Oh, I made that one up. That was just a trick question.
Okay, well, it didn't work.
Sounds real though, doesn't it? Inspector Phillips.
No, I instantly knew that it wasn't a real one.
Eat Well for Less. It's where Greg Wallace and another man see how much a family spend on a week's shopping and then criticise them. Make them eat porridge from Lidl.
Inform.
Well done. Sorry, I wasn't totting up the scores.
Thank you.
But this golden future of television would have to wait, because back in 1939 times, the TV signals were suddenly switched off because someone decided to start another war to end all wars.
Of course.
When he became leader of Germany, Adolf Hitler was a funny-looking character with silly hair, a bit
Yes.
like Boris Johnson, but he turned out to be...
No. This guy has far better hair than Boris Johnson ever dreamed of having. I mean, it's a very low bar. Now, we can talk about the mustache.
a hateful maniac who would let nothing get in the way of his ambition, a bit like Boris Johnson.
Fair.
Hitler believed the Germans were an elite race, like the Grand Prix. He also thought he owned Poland, and when he went round there to get it back, Britain cried war.
This country is at war with Germany.
Luckily, Britain had a hero on its side, a man whose name will never be forgotten, Winston Churchill.
Name will never be forgotten. She proceeds to mispronounce it.
Churchill's speeches were stirring and powerfully erotic.
We know it will be hard. We expect it will be long.
That was definitely powerfully erotic.
He was one of the greatest orators of all time, and some of the phrases he used still resonate today, such
All
as
right.
finest hour, never surrender, and of course, we shall fight them bitches.
We shall fight them on the beaches. I like her version better. He should have said that. He absolutely should have said that.
And we needed Churchill's stirring mumbling, because at first the war didn't go well. Within 6 months, France was occupied by the Nazis, who they didn't see coming because they'd been expecting the Germans. Hitler wanted to make Britain German, to match its royal family, but they...
True enough. The British royal family is largely German, if you get right down to it. German ancestry.
RAF held Hitler's forces back in amazing dogfights in the sky that were done by aeroplanes, not actual flying dogs, which sadly science still hasn't invented yet.
That might be true for World War II, but World War I, Snoopy absolutely flew to try to take down Baron von Richthofen, the Red Baron. That's canonical. Nobody can debate that. So for World War I, we'd had literal dogfights. Snoopy was definitely up there. World War II, yeah, there were no real dogfights. That's just a figure of speech.
This was the Battle of Britain.
It seems amazing that these young men could fly and fight so well. Although
Yes.
when you look, you'll see the planes had tiny targets and crosses drawn on the side.
I always wondered about that. I really did. Why do they have targets painted on them?
Which made them easier to hit.
But planes
Yep.
weren't only used in dogfights. The Germans changed tactics, Instead of attacking planes, which could move out of the way, they attacked the ground, which couldn't, in something called the Blitz.
The Blitz, yes.
Preceded by a shower of flares, German bombers rained fire and high explosive bombs in their most savage attack on London.
Hitler's pilots started dropping bombs.
Sort of aeroplane poos, and people had to hide from them.
They built big tin shelters in their gardens, or ran down the nearest tube station without a ticket or a valid Oyster card. Countless houses were reduced to big piles of bricks and wood, which is sort of...
Look at that. That's just horrifying. Could you imagine if that was where you lived? What that would be like? First of all, just to live through that, but also to come out when the raids are over and see what's left. Just heartbreaking. I have listened to live radio broadcasts from the Blitz. There's one you can find, I think it's on the National Archives, where Edward R. Murrow is doing live coverage during the Blitz from a rooftop overlooking London, and while he's describing it, you can hear the bombs going off all around. It really does create a different perspective of how things were at the time. Just devastating. And this is not just London. Berlin's going to get bombed, and of course Tokyo is going to get bombed. We're not even going to talk about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which get bombed on a whole new level.
what houses are anyway, but in a different order. Despite this, thanks to the plucky British spirit, people weren't totally down in the dumps, even if they lived in one.
Yes.
People sang songs during World War II
Oh, yes.
to keep their spirits up, didn't
Yes.
they? How loud did they have to sing to be heard over the bombs?
Well, especially as they would have sometimes been in underground stations, sheltering from the bombs. It would have been loud in the underground station, the singing, if everybody was singing together, but it's true, you wouldn't have been heard much.
I wonder if...
I want to say that some of the best songs ever written come out of wars. And not necessarily patriotic songs, although there's plenty of those as well. Songs of reminiscing of home, of The Girl I Left Behind Me, which I think was a major song in both World Wars, The Girl I Left Behind Me. But just the concept itself, you'll see it in all countries around the world. I've always had a fondness for war-era music, not necessarily battle hymns, although I like some of those too, but music that comes out of the period of war, because I think they're another lens through which we can look at history to help us understand what the people were thinking, what they were feeling, what the atmosphere and the mood was like. Let's go a little bit further on this, but I think I'm going to comment more on that in a minute.
When they sang, they used to time their singing with the explosions.
No,
That would be a fun thing to do.
Difficult.
Yes.
Very difficult to time it. It's quite random, the falling of bombs.
In the war, there were lots of songs taking the piss out of Hitler.
Oh,
weren't there?
yeah.
How come they don't sing those sorts of songs anymore?
Well,
He's not around anymore, so
Exactly.
it's not so amusing.
Where is he?
Well, he's dead.
He's
Yes.
dead.
Yes.
Oh, right, so it'd be disrespectful to...
Well, not
speak
so
No.
much disrespectful as pointless, really.
Yeah. I'm copying his words exactly because, yeah, I wouldn't say it's pointless, though. And I think, what's his name? Mel Brooks kind of proves that with Springtime for Hitler, for example, a musical number from the producers. And one of the reasons he included that was because by mocking Hitler, you're mocking everything he stands for. You're mocking the ideology. You're mocking the people who follow that ideology. So there's still a place for mocking that type of thing. And let's talk more about the music. My grandfather was a World War II veteran. My great-grandfather was a World War I veteran. My grandfather in particular came back from the war with a head full of songs that he learned while he was in the military. And almost all of them were silly ditties that they used when they were marching or walking or just in the barracks. And he used to sing them with me because they were kind of silly songs. So I kind of grew up on World War II soldier songs that were being sung by the soldiers in the war. And we're on the topic of mocking Angry Mustache Man. There was one my grandfather used to sing with me. And geez, this had to have been 45 years ago now, give or take. No, more than that. Oh, I'm getting old, because it's got to be over 50 years now. Sheesh. I'm really feeling my age all of a sudden. Let me see if I can remember how it went. It was a polka. Geez. La 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 la. Let me think for, well, it was, In the Führer's Face was the name of the song. I'm trying to remember how it started. If I can remember how it started, I can probably get through the first verse. Oh, yeah. When der Führer says, we are the master race, we heil, right in the Führer's face. Not to love der Führer is a big disgrace, so we heil, right in the Führer's face. I remember that one. He also used to sing, Mademoiselle from Amnestiers, parlez-vous? Mademoiselle from Amnestiers, parlez-vous? Mademoiselle from Amnestiers hasn't been kissed in 1,000 years. Dinky parlez-vous? What else? Oh, I apologize for my terrible singing. At the best of time, I'm barely passable. At the worst of times, like right now, when I'm dying of smoke, I'm probably horrible. Especially with no accompaniment. I am Captain Jinx of the Horse Marines. I feed my horse on oats and beans and court young ladies in the teams. I'm captain in the army. So many songs I can remember him singing when I was a kid. And like I said, he learned almost all of them during the war. But in addition to the silly songs or the songs poking fun at Angry Mustache Man, you also had a lot of sentimental ballads. England, I can think of There'll Be Bluebirds Over the White Cliffs of Dover, or We'll Meet Again was probably the most iconic. Here in the States, you had things like Till We Meet Again. World War I, we had Long Trail of Winding. Tramp, Tramp, Tramp has been around at least since the American Civil War, and it has shown up in every war since, including the Philippine-American War, where it was horribly vulgar and racist. Not something I'd ever care to repeat. But we also had songs like, well, literally the Girl I Left Behind Me, which was popular all over the world. Same thing with Germany, had Lily Marlene. That became a hit all over the world during the war. Everybody loved it. Russia had Sini Blatosik, the Blue Scarf, or the Blue Handkerchief, and Katusha. Katusha, they were both Girl I Left Behind Me style songs, themed songs, I guess I should say. I just really love the music that comes out of wars, because it really does help you get a better feel for the mood, the atmosphere, what people were thinking and caring about, and their sense of humor. Anyway, that's enough about that. It's just, when she was talking about that, and I was just thinking of my grandfather sitting me down in this very house over by the fireplace, and he would teach me some of these songs that he used to sing. He was also a big fan of Gilbert and Sullivan, and he used to teach me a lot of Gilbert and Sullivan operetta songs, the silly ones. But a lot of them, he specifically told me, he learned while he was at war.
Bit pointless.
Yeah. A lot of singing was needed because
it's a way to keep your spirits up.
Even when the Blitz ended, the war was far from over. There were many huge battles to come, most of which will never be forgotten, because they've since been converted into blockbuster movies.
How was it we beat the Germans at Dunkirk in War II, but still didn't win the whole war?
We didn't beat them at Dunkirk. Well, the Brits didn't beat them at Dunkirk. They lost Dunkirk. What makes Dunkirk iconic isn't that they won, it's that the civilians came together to rescue the soldiers.
Well, first of all, I think we've got to stop calling it War II. I mean, it's the Second World War if you're American, and you have to have it this way, it's World War II. But, you know, that's the language we tend to use. But in terms of Dunkirk, I think that's the wrong way round. We actually lose at Dunkirk.
We lost at Dunkirk?
We lost at Dunkirk. I mean,
I don't think so.
We did.
It turns out Dunkirk was a huge disaster. Like most sequels, War II was proving less fun than War I.
What made the war harder was that we didn't know what the Germans were planning.
because they said it in a sort of code language known as German. It took a team of British boffins using a magic typewriter called the Enigma machine literally loads of time to crack it, but crack it they did.
And with Germany's secrets twatted wide open, Britain and its allies were able to organise D-Day and invade France, but in a nice way.
But in a nice way. You know, I have to wonder if the ancestors of the British soldiers at D-Day were looking down from heaven or up from hell or wherever they happened to be and watching their descendants successfully invade France and go, wait, you're liberating them? We've tried this so many times and you finally succeed and you're liberating them? What kids these days!
In grueling and exciting scenes like these, expertly depicted in the post-cracking video game Call of Duty 2, soldiers scrambled out of their boats, looking for power-ups and health kits, terrified.
Yeah, I'm absolutely sure that's exactly what they were doing.
Every second that a Nazi bullet might kill them, forcing them to respawn several feet away.
I don't think that's how a war actually works. If you respawn, it's not several feet away, it's in another plane of existence. That's if you respawn at all.
Be delayed by a number of seconds. Eventually the British won, and immediately there was widespread jubilation and people dancing about in black and white and getting off with people who were almost certainly dead now.
She just had to go there. Unfortunately, yes, that's probably fairly accurate. World War II ended, 80 years ago now. So anybody that was fighting in it would be in their late 90s by now. Even people who were just born during that period are going to be in their 80s. So not much living memory of the Second World War left, which is a pity. Living memory of it's going to be gone very, very soon. Nice way to drive that home, Philomena.
A new, hopeful era had dawned. An era which 41 years later included the BBC painting and decorating television sitcom Brushstrokes.
All right, so I think we're done. I think we're out of World War II. So I think we're going to end this here because that's all I wanted to do was go through the two wars and the interwar period. So that was fun. We got to talk about some history, but we also had some laughs. Every once in a while, I just want to do something silly just for the sake of doing something silly. And if you guys want to see more Philomena Kunk, by all means, let me know. I don't plan on doing a lot more unless people want to see it, or unless I just get into a weird British humor mood like I'm in today, which can happen. Doesn't happen often, but it does happen. So anyway, I hope you guys had fun. I hope maybe you learned something. And yeah, I'll see y'all next time. Until then, bye-bye.